Hey campers, Georgia, back in the man cave. Woo! Here I am back at it again, having a look at knife information. And one of the things I wanted to get familiar with, what it's all about. These manufacturers are making knives. They're all different shapes, grinds, cuts, clips, points, you name it, they got it. And it has to be for a reason. And a lot of those reasons, I don't know. I want to have a look-see. And I thought you might be interested and want to come along and check it out as well. Blade styles. You've got drop point, trailing point, modified trail, straight back, spear point, straight edge, clip point, saber. And then there's grinds. And then there's tangs. So I've been making notes. We're going to start off with blade shapes. So as you can see in the picture again here, I've got a couple of different of the more commonly known blade shapes, or types if you want to call them. You've got a drop point, you've got a straight back, you've got a TANTO. By the way, there's the one that's in the picture here is actually an American TANTO. The Japanese TANTO is slightly different. It doesn't have some of the features that the American one does. And then clip point, sheep's foot, spear point, dagger point. There's a lot of points. What I want to do is just have a look at each one and just give you a little info on each kind so we can see what it's all about. Now, when you look at these things and you look at the shapes and everything, you know there has to be a reason for them. And that's what I want to look at. Now, the shape of the blade is important. Sure it is. But so is the grind. And they mix the grind with the shapes. You can use any grind with any shape, allegedly. So let's have a look, see what they're talking about. Here we go. Number one. Probably the most popular one out there that you see more than anything else. Certainly, when we're talking fixed blades knives, I'm not talking about folders. That's another story. They got a whole bunch more on that. But on fixed blade knives, probably the most common ones you're seeing here is a drop point. Another common one is the straight edge and a clip point. Now, a clip point you're going to see a lot more on folders, but you do get them on fixed blade. So let's have a look at the drop point. Looking at the drop point right now, you can see what they're talking about here. And if you look at the top, and if you remember some of the nomenclature that I used before in describing parts of a knife, if you look at the spine of the knife, you can see on a drop point, it's not flat. It doesn't go flat right across to the point of the blade. It actually drops off, hence the name drop point. And you can see how the grind of the blade comes up right to the point. And the top of the blade on the spine isn't sharpened. It's typically on a good drop point. That part of the blade is going to have a nice sharp 90 on it. Obviously, you want that because you're going to use it for a ferro rod. And that's what most people are using them for. Now, the drop point is very common in EDC knives, an everyday carry belt knife or fixed blade knife. The reason is that type of blade can give you pretty good performance in most situations you're going to find yourself in. It's kind of the jack of all trades in knife shape. Now, I have my knives out here, and unfortunately I don't have all the different shapes of the blades that we're going to talk about, but I have some that are pretty close. They have some extras on them. Here's an example here from Gerber, and it's this guy here. And here you can see on it there, it has that drop off. Now, on the edge here, this is not sharpened. Although you see that diamond there, which is that false edge that they have, not all drop points will have that. If you looked at the picture before, this grind here goes all the way to the tip of the point. This one goes a little bit higher above it, but the shape of the whole blade is more of a drop point. Okay, And the big difference here, people get confused between this and a spear point. Now, a spear point's a little different. On a spear point blade, and if you look here, this is more of a spear point blade there. Hopefully you can see that. And you can see that this part of the blade and here are almost matched exactly. Now, on a drop point, it's a little different. That drop off is less than the actual blade itself, the cutting edge. So that's the difference. Don't get confused between them. This one has a false edge on it, like I said. It's not really a cutting edge. And it does have a sharp 90 here, right on the spine. Jimping, all that good stuff that we talked about in the previous video. And I'll put a link up here to that video if you want to have a look at it. The next blade style I want to have a look at is actually called the straight back. And we talked a little bit about that before. But what I'm going to do is I'll show you one right now, and then we'll get to the picture and we'll talk about it a little bit more. And you're probably, just about everybody's familiar with these guys, Mora. And they have a fairly good example of a straight back, almost. Certainly on this one. If you look at the blade there, sorry, I need to clean my blade. It's flat here and then it drops off straight down a bit. Now, a straight back wouldn't have that little drop off, but you get the idea of what I'm talking about here. And this is a Knives of Alaska. And you can see here, this, let's see if we can get it focused there. You can see how flat the top of that blade is, and it comes right up to that point where the belly, the cutting edge, comes straight up to that point. Straight across, straight edge. Very, very popular in hunting. An excellent knife to take hunting with you. You can do a lot of the hunting chores you want to with this. Is that one of the best things about it, and the reason it's so popular with skinning and bushcraft, hunting type things, is that tip is extremely good for piercing. So when you're out hunting, you need it to skin. So that initial cut that you make with the tip of the knife is important. And that's why it's got such a good tip on it like that. And it comes to that nice sharp point, and it's a flat blade. You have that curved belly, which is great for skinning. Bushcraft skills, just as good. Although I personally prefer the drop point or a spear point for a bushcraft knife. But that's my personal preference. The Scandinavian grind on that is very popular for that kind of a blade. A lot of these knives are based after I think it's called the Puko knife from Scandinavia. A lot of history behind it. Hunting, bushcraft, EDC that they carried around forever. One thing I did notice when reading about it, everybody said that the most common straight back knife is the Swedish Mora. I've looked at them and they have that little slight drop off in the front, but it's still considered a straight back knife. The next blade style or knife style that I wanted to show you is kind of a fun one. I own one only because I thought it was cool, and that is the TANTO. Now, everybody knows what a TANTO looks like, right? It's this guy here. And it's a very, very unique blade shape. You've got your flat edge up here, a flat edge down the bottom, and another edge up there. Now, this is what everybody in the US calls a TANTO blade. The real name, American TANTO. The Japanese TANTO is different, and it's based on the samurai swords and that sort of thing, and we all know the history of them. This little point down here was added in the US. The Japanese actually don't have that. The true TANTO just curves up, and it keeps going up, which makes it a great stabbing and slashing knife. So really, you'll find TANTO blades like this more on a tactical style knife. This one is heavy. Look at the thickness of that blade. And this is a one from GCS Knives. And I tell you, just the weight of the knife you could kill somebody with. It is heavy as ever. And it's a beautiful blade. And I got it simply because I wanted to have a look at a TANTO blade. Actually, I wanted to see if I could use it and do some bushcrafty stuff on, which I actually did do, and it worked fine. I mean, it has a tip there. It has a 90-degree edge. It has a sharp edge, although the blade is really thick, so more delicate cuts and things like that were a little bit more difficult. But it did most of the chores that you would need for bushcraft, and I think just about any fixed blade knife can do that. The American TANTO are perfect for piercing, and obviously I have a huge heritage in Japanese samurai swords and how the angle of the tip influences the cut. And obviously you can do a lot of tactical stuff with it, which is the main reason for the design. So that was the TANTO blade. What we're going to talk about next is the clip point. And the clip point is typically seen more on a folding EDC pocket carry style knife. And I have 3 examples here of pocket knives, and they're all slightly different. Now, everybody's familiar with the Opinel, and you can see it has that dip. See it there? Right there. You have a flat, and then it dips off and comes up into that point, and the cutting edge comes up there. And that's pretty common with just about everything Opinel does. And everybody else who makes similar style knives will have that same thing. Here's an Antonini knife. This is the old Bear series, and you can see there. You can see the clip point a little bit more obvious here, maybe a little bit more deeper, and doesn't quite come up to that point like on the Opinel. Struggle with the name. And Lagolil, Lugal, whatever it is. Here it is here. And it's an unusual knife. And you can see here how exaggerated that clip point is. Look how far it goes up. You've got that short flat edge, and then down here to clip off to come to the point. So there's different styles. All the manufacturers have their own ideas with it, and they'll all be just a slight bit different. The length of it, the depth of the clip point. So that's the clip point. And having just talked to you about clip points and buck knives, I realized I have a buck. It's got to have a clip point on it. And there you go. There is what I would consider a pretty true clip point. Look how deep that cutoff is down here. And this is an old timer. This is what I'm more used to when I think about a folding knife, a working pocket knife. Just about everybody I knew had ones like this. This is an old timer. It looks just like the old bucks. This one's actually made by Schrade, and they own the old timer ones. And you can see here how obvious that clip point is. So I just wanted to show you that. And still on that subject of clip points, the other day I was digging through a box I had of old tools and stuff that were given to me by my ex-father-in-law. And he had a whole bunch of stuff, fishing stuff and everything, and he gave it to me. And in there was a knife. This guy. See it? Clip point. See it? Clip point. See it? Clip point. Look at this thing. It's a thing of beauty. See that? And I've tried to find out who made it, where it was made. And the only thing I could find was, if I remember, I believe it says stainless, Pakistan. So there you go. Double bladed. And it is a really old knife. It's kind of beat up. I would like to clean it up and fix it up. But I'd like to know more about it before I put any time into it. But a double clip point. Can't beat that. The next blade style I want to talk about is called the sheep's foot. Actually had one, and I gave it to my nephew. as a pocket knife. It was a pocket knife. It was actually called a biltong. He grew up in South Africa, biltong, South Africa, and I thought it would be a good thing and gave it to him. It's an unusual shape, and I could never figure out why would you want a sheep's foot blade. It looks like a flat back with no real point on it. And then I read about it. And if you look at the picture here, you can see it. There you can see how the sheep's foot shape is. Basically, it has an almost a blunt tip. And the reason for that is they don't want it puncturing anything. Now, what does that tell you? A lot of it was designed, I think, for first responders when they're cutting things. For example, you're in a car accident and they want to get you out of the seatbelt. You don't want a clip point there. It's got a nice sharp point and they're going to stab the person. So having that sheep's foot doesn't have any really sharp, pointy edges to it. You can pull the belt away and slice right through it. Somebody who does rafting, blow up rafts and canoes and kayaks and things like that, you don't want a sharp point around. You know, you drop the knife, whoops, you're in trouble. So like fishing guides, rafting, that sort of thing, they like them as well. And that's why they were designed. Otherwise, it's just a straightforward knife. The reason for having that no point on the top, rather at the bottom, and not such a good one at that, makes it a handy knife for certain situations. Here we have the spear point. This is probably my favorite because I like bushcraft knives. And I think that a spear point makes a good bushcraft knife. Here you can see how the spear point is symmetrical. The top of the blade comes down almost like a drop point, and the bottom of the blade comes up to meet it, so that the tip of the blade is almost dead center of the blade. Here is the bush law from Condor, and you can see here, this shape here almost matches that shape there, and that's what makes it that spear point. The top is not sharp, only the bottom, and it comes up right to that point. Spear point, very popular with bushcraft knives. Obviously, this is a bush law. It has that nice sharp point, so you can dig holes in it. Sturdy style blade. This one, obviously, is a Scandi grind, and it has that sharp 90. Not a very long blade. The next one we're looking at right now is the dagger point, and that's pretty obvious. This is obviously for no other reason other than a tactical knife. Self-defense. You can slash and stab with this thing and cause some real damage with it. Typically the blades are thinner, needle point, sometimes referred to. And the biggest difference between a dagger point and a spear point, the dagger point, both the top and the bottom of the blade, the spine and the cutting edge, as we talk about it, are both sharpened. So it is a stabbing design, very common with tactical. When you think about a dagger point, everybody knows what a dagger is. And it's typically a reason, the depth of the blade, when I say the depth or the width of the blade, is not that big. It's typically smaller than your average EDC, bushcraft, hunting, camping knife. It's a little bit, I'd say, thinner, and it's sharpened both sides. During the Second World War, they were developed even more by certain people coming out with their own styles for the commandos and things like that. That's the dagger point. The next up is the trailing point. If you're looking at these pictures, you can see there's a trailing point and a modified trailing point. The most obvious thing about a trailing point is when you look at it, the very tip of the blade. If you look at the top, it is not a flat spine. The spine actually curves up slightly. It goes right up into the tip. The tip actually sits higher than the spine of the blade. And that whole cutting edge follows it right up to that tip. Now, right there, perfect for a saber. Back in the day, sabers on horseback, it was the perfect fighting sword if you were a cavalryman. And, it's great for slashing because that's what you would be doing. You would be on a horse and slashing down onto the foot soldiers. So that's what a trailing edge is. What they're talking about is the edge trails down from the tip of the point. Now you have a modified trailing point. Now I don't have a trailing point, but I do have a modified one. Let me show you that. So here it is here, and this is an elk ridge that I got somewhere. And here you can see what I'm talking about here, how it's a modified trailing point. You see how the blade comes up. Typically on a trailing point, this would keep going up, and this tip would be up here above the ridge, and you'd have that long front slash on it for your cutting edge, where you'd be slashing down or across, whatever. This is a modified one. And what they've done here is they've taken away that flip up here, cut that off, and put the tip right there. But it is still a trailing point because they haven't got, it does raise up still. This side is not sharp at all. It's just a flat spine. Your whole cutting edge is here. It gives you a much longer cutting edge. And this is called the modified trailing edge. An interesting design. Now, the reason for the modification, and I'll show you here, is this part of the blade down here is great for skinning and cutting. So hunting knives will have this as well. And typically, looking at what people were saying about these, they're never really on a big knife. You won't find a modified trailing point on a big fixed blade knife. And this one is not big at all. What's it about? Maybe 6 inches, the total length. But an excellent skinning knife because you have that whole belly in front here, which really helps when you're skinning. If you're cutting up meat and things like that, it gives you a really good fillet out of it. Hunters and fishermen love these things. Designed specifically for slicing and skinning. So there you go. A look at some of the most common types of blades out there. And, you know, obviously there are a lot. And a lot of them have been modified, just like that trailing point, you know, this one has been modified. You've got all different kinds here. There is so many, and they're changing all the time. And unfortunately, you know, reading up on a lot of these things, I don't consider myself an old school. I'm old, but I'm not old school in this information. A lot of people say that knife manufacturers have determined which blades and grinds are to be used for certain tasks, and you know, what was popular at the time. If you think about the movie Rambo, the original Rambo movie, how that influenced tactical knives and survival knives even, where you had the compass and everything else in the handle and you could do this and that and build a house with it. Became very popular just because of the trend in a movie. But there's a fairly quick and not really in-depth look at blade styles, probably the most common ones we hear about the most. And up next, what I want to talk about, which will be in the next video because they're going to get too long if I try and fit in too much, is grinds. That's interesting. So the next thing I want to talk about, which is still, I think of it as part of the blade knife design, and that is the tang of a knife. And I think, you know, obviously you guys know what a tang is on a knife. So I'm going to go over it really quickly. There's basically 3 different kinds of tang on a knife. You have this kind here. And what they're talking about is, here you have the blade and the steel, the main body of the knife. This is the important piece. But the handle and how the handle is attached to the blade is important, and that's where the tang comes in. If you look at this, we're looking at the bush law again. I can see that from here to here, all the way around and back to the tip, I can see all of the steel. And typically, 99 times out of 100, that tells me it's a full tang knife. In other words, the blank of the knife is one solid piece. Nothing's been added and nothing's been cut off it. It's all one piece. The only stuff that's come out of the actual blank would be the shape of the handle here, and that's so that you can hold it. Otherwise, you would have steel across here. And so it's considered a full tang. And the easiest way is, can you see it all? Now, don't be fooled. Some knives, especially the smaller knives like Mora and that, but if you look at it, the actual handle of the blade, this piece here, and this is molded. Can you see that? Here is the blade. I can't see where this steel goes and comes back. I don't know if this is one whole piece. For all I know, it could stop right there. I don't know because this is molded. Don't be fooled. Don't automatically assume it's not a full tang. It can be they mold the handle around it. So, the easiest way to know, contact the manufacturer. What tang is on my knife? And they'll tell you. Now, it doesn't matter what the shape of the blade or anything like that is. You can see this guy, the monster, is a full tang. You can see on this guy here, the Gerber that I showed you earlier, it's obvious. You can almost see the whole blank. It's a full tang. Well, you wonder what else is there? Well, there's a half tang. And basically what that means is when you're looking at the knife here, this part of the blank is solid probably until about here, or sometimes even there, which is about halfway down the handle. And then it's cut off and cut back so that you just have a little strip of metal down here. Why do they do that? Cost saving is the number one reason. Unfortunately, sometimes they stop it too soon and you have this nice solid blade here and it gets trimmed down to almost nothing and you bludgeon it, snap. I mean, don't get me wrong, some of the half tangs, like I said, come all the way out here, it's full, and then they'll have a little tail on the back here. Not a big deal, you're holding here and you're hitting there, there's a lot of strength to it. Not as much as a full tang, but the half tang is still fairly sturdy. This is a thin knife and, you're going to limit your bludgeoning to it. But if you have a big heavy duty knife like this, where you have a heavy blade in that and it has a half tang in it, and you're looking at the blade thinking, I can whack that thing. Maybe not. You're going to snap the handle off. So be sure of what tang you have on the blank. I'm not saying this knife has it. I'm not sure what this is. I suspect this might be a half tang. I don't know. I can find out. But they'll have this whole blade and it ends here, and then just a little steel rod is welded onto the end for them to mold the handle around. Not good. You've got no strength in that for what we typically out in the doors would be banging away on our knives. So there you go. Tangs, 3 of them, full, half, and a rat's tail. And a rat's tail is the one that's going to be welded on, or it's been trimmed down so thin in the middle here that it has no strength at all. It's just somewhere for them to put the mold onto. So there you go, campers. A look at blade shapes, knife shapes, styles, whatever you want to call them, and why they're the way they are. Hopefully you learned something like I did. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of information out there, and it's some interesting reading. Some of the places I got to gave some really good history, which I didn't really want to get into. It just makes the video too long. I try to cut this down as much as possible, make it as simple as possible, and hopefully give you a better understanding when you're choosing a knife and the tasks you're going to be using it for. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe. You know the story. Pretty sure I'll be back again with some more useless information. Grinds. I'm looking forward to grinds. Going to be interesting to see why there are these different grinds and why are they so important. Hopefully we can put this all together and hopefully come up with a reason they say this is a bushcraft, this is hunting, this is camping, this is tactical. That's the plan. I want to be able to look at a knife and say it was designed to be a fill in the blank by looking at the shape of the blade, the type of grind. Just saying. Thanks for watching, and you be safe out there, especially with the sharp and shiny things.